Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We want to go ahead and get started. We know people are still entering. So we know why we're here. We know what time of the year it is and what the season is. And when we think about honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we usually hear his words. But today we want to start by hearing his words in his own voice. We had the privilege of spending some time with Dr. Moss today, and he called it the poetic prophesying of the dream. And I think it's so important for us to hear it in its entirety, because we had to see and we get an opportunity to understand the struggle and the challenges that dream persisted through. And so I'm just so grateful that we have it so we can experience it. Some people in this room were actually there, but for the rest of us, this is the way we get to experience it. And we wanted to hear his voice first, his words, his voice, as we go into this weekend of celebration and remembering the sacrifice. So I would like to invite to the stage next our mayor, David E. Weiss, Dr. Emmett Jolly from the Board of Education, the Board of Education President, and Amy Switzer, the Shaker Heights Public Library Director, to give us some opening remarks.
Thank you, Colleen. It is my honor and privilege to join all of you this evening for tonight's reflection on the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Watching the video of Dr. King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech is a stirring reminder of the passion and conviction of this man of peace. A man who faced years of anger and hatred directed at him, his movement, and his family, and yet who never lost faith in his commitment to fight for social justice and to promote nonviolent resistance. We are also very fortunate to hear tonight from Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, Jr., who stood side by side with Dr. King, both literally and figuratively, as he carried on his work. So today, our charge is to ask ourselves, how can we promote human dignity and peace in our daily lives? How can we move from the diversity that we cherish and celebrate here in Shaker Heights to true equity and inclusion? And then how do we move from asking these questions to taking meaningful action? Shaker Heights is nationally recognized as a city that embraced racial integration over half a century ago. And yet we all know all too well that we have much, much more work to do. Thus, on this day, and indeed every day, we must recommit ourselves to the ideals and principles of Dr. King. And I hope tonight that the dialogue we have and the events planned for Sunday and Monday will help us to reflect on what we can do to promote Dr. King's idea of the beloved community right here in Shaker Heights. In closing, I want to thank Dr. Moss and all of you for attending this evening's program, and I'd like to express great appreciation to those from the city, the schools, and the library whose hard work and ongoing collaboration make this evening a success. And with that, I will turn the podium over to Dr. Jolly.
That speech was delivered 60 years ago, and it still rings of freedom, and it makes my soul rejoice. Good evening, my name is Dr. Emmett Jolly. I'm the president of the Shaker Heights School Board. On behalf of my colleagues, I present greetings and as we celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. I know Dr. Glassner also wanted to be here, but unfortunately, he was unable to attend. Dr. King spent a significant amount of his time in Alabama pushing civil rights from Birmingham to Montgomery to Selma to Mobile. As some of you are aware, I grew up in Alabama. There I worked in cotton fields for several years. While working in the cotton fields, I will tell you there was a white guy who sat in a pickup truck with a shotgun across his lap. And he told us that the reason he had that shotgun across his lap was in case us boys got ornery, which in the north of the Mason-Dixon line is called honorary. I was fired from a job after having lunch with a white girl. My father's family was the first family to defeat the KKK in southern Georgia. In 2012, when President Obama was elected, he went into his office and found a noose. I provide this list of non-microaggressive acts as I'm still in my 40s. And it says there's still so much work to do, but this is nothing compared to the challenges that Dr. King and the people who were engaged in the civil rights went through. Let me just give you just a visual idea of how momentous what they accomplished was. I remember visiting the Alabama State Capitol for the first time when I was in the 4th grade. It was ginormous. It was beautiful. This glowing white building with majestic columns, a capitol, a rotunda. It stood out on the landscape. Immediately to the east of it, again beautiful and all white, was the first house of the Confederacy and the residence of President Jefferson Davis. In the southeast corner, another beautiful white column edifice that houses the Alabama State Attorney General. And just across the street, in the southeast corner, just steps away from this majestic set of buildings, was a small, tiny Alabama red dirt brick colored church named Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. This was Dr. King's church. And this little colored brick church represents the momentous challenge and the struggle Dr. King and the civil rights had to overcome in civil battle with the first proud capital of the Confederacy. This kind of David and Goliath civil struggle only exemplifies the significance of Dr. King and this most contested holiday, and so we celebrate. As we think of Dr. King and his march on Selma, I have to ask that we keep the families in Selma, Alabama in our thoughts, as they were just impacted by a major tornado. As we listen and I follow the mayor, please think about what we can do today to make an impact, where we still fight for continued civil rights, where here in Shaker we work to stand for what is good. And we have not yet made it there. We have to continue to strive and to struggle. I look forward to hearing wise words from my Tau Boulay fraternity brother, Otis Moss. And on behalf of the Shaker Heights Board of Education, let me once again say thank you and welcome. We look forward to celebrating together.
Wow. I get to follow that. Thank you. I'm Amy Schweitzer, and I'm the library director at Shaker Heights Library. And I'm so pleased and honored to be here with you as we honor Dr. King's legacy. Mayor Weiss and Dr. Jolly have already given such eloquent and powerful welcomes, and I know that we're eager to get on with the program. So I'm going to be very brief, because I can't even. But I think as I think about the work that we still need to do, I really appreciate Dr. King's words when he said that power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And I think for those of us who hold positions of power, that is something to keep in mind as we move forward. And my hope that we can continue to work to move our community forward to a more equitable, more inclusive, and more beloved community. And I look forward to continuing this inspiring evening. And before I step away, I just also want to take a minute to thank all of the people who worked so very hard behind the scenes to put this really impressive evening together. Really appreciate their work, and to thank the schools for hosting us. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for your opening remarks. Now I would like to invite to the stage Thomas Cicerella, who is the Shaker Library Board President, and he's going to introduce to us our Shaker Library Writing Contest winning essays.
Well, good evening. As introduced, my name's Tom Cicerella, and I am president of the Board of Trustees for the Shaker Heights Public Library. And I don't think that there will ever be a time when I am in front of any people when I'm not going to give an unabashed plug for the library. Everyone here knows the library has books. We have plenty of books. Everyone goes to the library and you see the books. But one thing you may not be quite so aware of is all of the programming that we have, which is extensive and spectacular. It's literally from cradle to seniors and everything in between. And I would suggest that it would be prudent for you to take the time to go on our website and take a look at all of the programming. I'm sure that you would find something in there that you would love to participate in. You can also take a look at the Shaker Life magazine, where every installment has in the library section a summary of some of the programming. So I suggest that you do that. I have the privilege of being able to introduce the winners of the Shaker Heights Martin Luther King Student Writing Contest. Now, we asked third and fourth graders to participate in a contest and fifth and sixth graders in the city to participate in the contest. And we had quite a few people respond to that. And it's my privilege to introduce those individuals whom the judges picked as the winners of the contest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off the names, first of the third and fourth graders who are the winners, and then the fifth and sixth graders who are the winners. Amy is going to present the certificates which evidence their participation and success in the program. And in addition, the winners are going to find that they're going to have a cash prize associated with this, which the Friends of the Shaker Heights Library provided. The wonderful friends have provided. So they'll have that. In addition, a final bonus is going to be, for all of you, the fact that the two first place prize winners are going to read their composition to you. So let's start out. For the third and fourth graders first, the third place prize goes to Asher Nave from St. Dominic School. That's it. The second place goes to Amira Marie Ford from Boulevard School. And first place goes to Michael Peoples from Boulevard School. All right, now for the fifth and sixth grade winners. Third place goes to Molly Weingart from Woodbury School. Second place goes to Robbie McCullough from Woodbury School. And first place goes to Claire Richard from Menlo Park Academy. Well, I'm so happy that you are also appreciative of our winners. And now I'm going to ask all but the first place winners to take their seats again. We'll keep the two first place winners up here so that they can read their essay to you. So you can start first. So first we're going to have Michael Peoples read his essay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Peoples, and I go to Boulevard Elementary. When I think of a beloved community, I think of togetherness, a place filled with understanding, hope, and laughter that's made up of our unique selves. It's like being on the beach, building a sandcastle, and children I don't know help joined to help me build the foundation. We worked together to mold and shape our sandcastle to represent everyone's ideas into a whole. Even though we do not know how the sandcastle will turn out, we enjoy the experience of togetherness. Just like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamt of a beloved community, I also believe we can achieve that dream by setting an example for others to follow and taking accountability for our actions. We need to be kind to our classmates, friends, neighbors, and strangers. We should also listen to feedback from authority figures and listen to the rules they set for us. We should also stand up for those who are victims of bullying, abuse, and hate. If we see something, we should say something. If something doesn't feel right, it may not be right. We need to be the boss of our emotions and feelings and think about how this may affect others. No one wants to be living in a community full of hate, fear, and violence. We need to have more community activities within our neighborhood for parents, children, teachers, and police officers to come together in harmony and learn about each other and the different cultures and values that make up our community. This will help us better understand each other and educate each other so we can create a beloved community.
Okay, now that was terrific, and you obviously appreciated it as well. Now we'll have Claire Richards, who was the 5th, 6th grade winner.
I walk along the sidewalk, staring sadly at the endless sea of garbage. I turn the bend and find people, old and young, picking up the trash. The world is not perfect, but we are trying. He walks through the forest, feeling the peace of nature. Quite suddenly, the trees turn to stumps, and the pensiveness vanishes. The pollution from the machines that had brought so many trees death had hung in the air, a reminder of what humans had done. But 2 weeks later, protests filled the streets. The world is not perfect, but we are trying. A black man died. It was not an accident. It was not natural. Children and grown-ups, they were all witnesses. And yet, the person who did it, we don't know if he'll be charged or found as guilty, even though there were plenty of witnesses to convict. But people learned, and people cared, and people would not stand for any more injustices in their world. It is not perfect, but we are trying. The world is not perfect, but it is better. You just have to make it get better. So keep going, be kind. You can go to where you want to go, but bring others there too. You aren't alone.
Well, that was terrific as well. I think that you would agree that everyone who entered the contest, in addition to the 6 students that we had here, everyone who entered really was a winner, as far as I'm concerned. And I will tell you this, everyone who read the essays or heard them here, I believe was a winner for the impact of the statements that they made. Thank you very much.
We are so grateful that we have been able to experience and share in this time of celebrating our youth by this collaboration of people to put this together. And it was important to us that we will be able to celebrate you all and thank you for your contributions to the essay contest so that so many more people could be able to hear you. The next person I want to invite to the stage is Dr. Lawrence Burnley. And he is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Shaker Heights City School District. And I call him my collaborator and friend. And so often people say, you're the DEI person, right? Schools or city? And they just go back and forth between us. And I'm so grateful that I have a co-conspirator in Dr. Burnley. We started I was only here 6 months before you. So we've made it our mission to make sure we're working together because it's quite a charge that we have. He's in charge of where you learn, I'm in charge of where you live, but we need all of us to do it together. So I'm gonna invite Dr. Burnley up so he can introduce our speaker.
Good evening. You know, in this time where we're challenged with so many things in our world. What we just witnessed, I don't know about you, it was an injection of hope and inspiration. So let's give these young people another hand. Over the next several days, there will be thousands of programs featuring speeches, lectures, and sermons that will focus on the ministry and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Very few of these, however, will have the distinct honor, privilege, and blessing to hear the words, reflections, remembrances, and analyses of a person who was not only a contemporary of Dr. King, but was in fact a member of his inner circle of leadership and a close friend of the man we gather here tonight to commemorate and celebrate. In a recent meeting with the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr., I asked him if there were specific features of his illustrious body of work and service that he would like for me to highlight in my introduction of him. Now, he could have said that he wanted me to point out that he was born on February 26, 1935 in LaGrange, Georgia, to Magnolia and Otis Moss Sr. Dr. Moss, the fourth of 5 children, could have told me that I should mention that he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree at Morehouse College in 1956, where he met Dr. King, and that he later earned his Master of Divinity degree at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, and a Doctor of Ministry degree from United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. But he didn't. Dr. Moss could have instructed me to ensure, to let the people know that he participated in every major struggle during the civil rights movement, that he was arrested for sit-ins pushing for segregation or desegregation, that he helped to plan the March on Washington, and March from Selma, and the March from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights, just to name a few. He could have told me to let the people know that he was recognized for these sacrifices and many more by being inducted into the International Civil Rights Hall of Fame, or Walk of Fame. Dr. Moss could have told me that, let the people know that he was an advisor to President Jimmy Carter, and also befriended such luminaries such as Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Oprah Winfrey. But he didn't mention any of that. Dr. Moss could have said, well, I must tell the people in the audience that in 1975, he became pastor of Olivet Institutional Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, the largest black church in Ohio, where he served for 33 years and advocated for quality housing, education, and medical care. He could have said, let the people know that in 1997, he partnered with university hospitals for the establishment of the Otis Moss Jr. University Hospital's Health Center, offering high-quality patient care in a spiritually supportive environment with integrated social and economic services. Dr. Moss could have instructed me to say a number of these things and many more about his illustrious career as a Baptist minister, social activist, rooted firmly in the prophetic tradition of the church. But he didn't. In response to my question about what was important to him for me to mention this evening, Dr. Moss said the following: "Tell them my wife is an activist and that we met in the movement. Tell the people that Dr. King officiated over our marriage. Let the people know," said Dr. Moss, "that my wife was on the administrative staff of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and worked with Dr. King. Let them know that she worked with the Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker and the Honorable Andrew Young on the day-to-day support and operations and planning for the Selma to Montgomery March and other protests in Birmingham and St. Augusta and Albany. Tell the people," said Dr. Moss, "that the women in the movement are the persons not seen. But without them, there would have been no movement. These were," said Dr. Moss, "these were outstanding black women. Tell the audience about these women. Please allow me to acknowledge with deep appreciation and gratitude the presence, we thought his wife, Miss Edwina Hudson Smith Moss, would be with us, but she is feeling under the weather this evening. But help me to honor this great woman who is a great leader in her own right." So, in the spirit of the South African concept of Ubuntu, which posits "I am because you are," that I say we are because he was and he is. It is with a great sense of honor and privilege and deep humility and heartfelt appreciation and gratitude that I introduce to some and present to others the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr. Hear he.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my salvation, my strength and my Redeemer. Thank you, Dr. Burnley, for these exceptional, kind words of introduction. Learning from one of my mentors, I must say that your introduction is highly exaggerated. However, I want to appeal to you to believe every word of it. It helps me and does you no harm. To the distinguished leadership of this institution, Shaker Heights High School, and the city of Shaker, and the Shaker Library System, the faculty and students and leader of Shaker Heights High School. A special congratulations to the participants and the winners of the essay contest. Give them another hand. I want to thank their parents, their families, and their teachers. How remarkable. And those of you who will be around 25 years from now, you will have the opportunity to learn from them and congratulate them for carrying on a remarkable work whose foundation can be identified right here in this community. I want to say that our family, our wife, Edwina, our children, Kevin, our daughter, late daughter Daphne, and Otis III, we all have special affection and relationship with the Shaker community. When we moved to the greater Cleveland area, we moved to Shaker Boulevard. And Otis III was enrolled at Mercer, Daphne at Byron, and Kevin at Shaker High. So you can see we had a great time going to meetings at Mercer, Byron, and Shaker. Shaker High, we had a chance to chant, "Go ye mighty Raiders." It is like a family gathering, a homecoming. Special greetings from my wife, Edwina, of 56 years, with regrets that she could not be present this evening. I want to ask you to do something that I have been doing for 40 years now, and I want you to help me continue this special affirmation with your voice and your strength, your hope, your aspiration. Will you repeat after me? Repeat after me. Repeat after me. In my time and in my space, I can make a difference. Look at your neighbor and say, in your time and in your space, you can make a difference. Now put your arms to your chest and say, in our time and in our space, we can, we will, we must make a difference. You know, that's almost all I have to say. But I'm not going to sit down right now. You see, Edwina and I, as our friend Dr. Burnley has indicated, met in the movement. We worked in the movement with Dr. King. We became friends in the movement. We became special friends in the movement. We became engaged in the movement. We were united in holy wedlock in the movement. And therefore, the movement is forever a part of our breathing, our walk, our talk, our prayers, our lives. You know, as I listened to Dr. King's world-renowned presentation, I Have a Dream, I was standing, as was 250,000 plus others, in that audience, in that crowd, in that assembly. I was about 25 feet from the stage and felt the energy, the charge, the commitment, and our reason for being there. And from that experience, a large delegation from Cincinnati, went back to our home community and sought to make a difference. Our first engagement was a march of about 25 or 30,000 individuals gathering at Public Square, and we moved into the last days of voter registration and voter turnout, and from that effort elected the late Ted Berry, Theodore Berry, to city council for the second time. We pulled him out of retirement, and he went on to become the first African-American mayor of the city of Cincinnati. These commitments and these involvements continue. Now, you have heard much and read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail. It is a classic, written on scraps of paper and practically smothered out of the jail, placed in the hands of the late Wyatt T. Walker and the secretaries of SCLC, and typed and published and sent around the world, and it is now a document document in the freedom literature. It has found its way in classrooms and in seminars, in pulpits, and in discussions across the nation, yea, the world. You're familiar with that letter, the letter from Birmingham jail. Written from a jail cell under brutal circumstances. But there's another letter. That's another letter, highly personal, written 3 years before the letter from Birmingham jail. And before I comment on that letter, I want to say that it grew out of a special request we made to Dr. King during the student sit-in movement in Atlanta, when our movement was at its lowest. And there was a sense, among some, a sense of failure. We asked Dr. King to go to jail with us. He was preparing to go to Nigeria, West Africa at the time. Mrs. King was pregnant, and there were all kinds of demands, but he put aside everything and went to jail with the students in Atlanta. We had a special kind of organizational structure, and we took democratic votes on who would do certain things and take on certain responsibilities. And guess what? The planning committee designated that I would not go to jail in that instance, but would stay out and would communicate back and forth between all of those who went to jail and carry messages from the community to them and from them to the community. And we thought that we were making great progress because we pulled the mayor of Atlanta into the process. And he committed himself to work with the merchants of Atlanta to desegregate all of the lunch counters plus some other things. But we did not quite win on that go-around, but we won something we did not even realize, but it was won with great pain. When we got all of the students out of jail without bail, we discovered something terribly disturbing. The deputy sheriff from DeKalb County was parked outside of the jail to rearrest Dr. King the moment he stepped out of the Atlanta jail. So, the person in charge, the sheriff of Fulton County, said to Dr. King, "You will be safer in my jail until Monday morning when your trial is to come up. I would advise you to stay in this jail. It is much safer than DeKalb County." Can you imagine that? Dr. King remained, and the painful thing about it, everybody else had been released. and he was in jail alone for the first and last time in his life. We went to trial that Monday morning. That's when they transported him in manacles and went to Decatur, Georgia. During the trial, and guess what the trial was about? The officials of DeKalb County said Dr. King was on probation because he had received a minor traffic violation several months before. And they said, since you were on probation, you were driving with an Alabama driver's license that had expired a few days before you were ticketed. So you must go to trial. And he did. Courtroom was filled and packed with students and adults. At the end of the trial, the judge sentenced Dr. King to 4 months public works, jail, prison for a minor traffic violation. During the trial, when Dr. King's attorney was making his appeal, the judge looked at him. His name was Judge Mitchell, looked at the attorney and said, how long is it going to take you to get through here? I have a fishing trip coming up. That was the atmosphere the judge set. Dr. King was sentenced. 4 months, public works, Georgia prison. Before the lawyer could appeal the judge's decision, the next morning at around 4 a.m., they put shackles, chains on Dr. King's body and handcuffs, along with a dog in the transport, and drove him 230 miles across the state to the Reidsville State Prison, where at that time the electric chair was housed. There he was. Appeals went out to every civil rights organization. Appeals went out to President Eisenhower. This was 1960, October. We didn't hear from President Eisenhower. Appeals went out to candidate and Vice President Nixon. We didn't hear from him. Appeals went out to candidate John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And guess what? He picked up the phone and called Mrs. King. And Robert Kennedy picked up the phone and called the judge. And Dr. King was released from the state prison. Now, I don't know what Robert Kennedy said to the judge, but when I meet him in eternity, I'm going to ask him not only what did you say, but how did you say it? Dr. King was released. And guess what? At that moment, Kennedy was trailing Nixon in the 1960 presidential election. The word went out. We held a mass meeting, and Daddy King, Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., stood up at the mass meeting and said, "I want you all to know that I had endorsed Nixon. But I have never been able to write so well that I did not need an eraser for my pen. And what I'm going to do is change my endorsement. And I'm going to collect all of the votes I can get and put them in a suitcase and place them in the lap of John Fitzgerald Kennedy." The audience went wild. But that's not the end of the story. A document was printed, signed by a group of African American ministers and distributed in major cities like Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, New York, St. Louis, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and other key cities in America. And one record shows that John Fitzgerald Kennedy moved ahead of Nixon and won the presidency by less than one half vote per precinct. So, many people don't know it and some won't admit it. John Fitzgerald Kennedy became President of the United States of America, President-elect, in 1960 from a jail cell. In Reidsville State Prison in Georgia. That's how remarkable the leadership and the prophetic presence of Martin Luther King Jr. was in 1960 presidential election. And if I had more time, I would go on to tell you that not only was Kennedy elected, but tragically assassinated and succeeded by Johnson. And Johnson won the presidency in '64 by landslide. So from a jail cell, Dr. King elected 2 presidents. But that's not the end of the story. When President Carter, running for president, met with a group of us, he said in his opening remarks, "But for Martin Luther King Jr., I, from Plains, Georgia, a peanut farmer, could not be running for president of the United States." So, in his lifetime, Dr. King elected 2 presidents, and from his grave, elected a 3rd. And then a group of us went to Little Rock, Arkansas, to meet with a young man named William Bill Clinton. And he said, "I'm standing on the shoulders of Martin Luther King Jr. So, it's not an exaggeration to say that Dr. King elected 4 presidents. And then one night, around 11 o'clock, 2008, standing on the shoulders of Martin Luther King Jr., a young man named Barack Obama became the winner of the presidential election of 2008. Can you believe that? So, from a jail cell, Dr. King elected 2 presidents, and from his grave played a key role in the election of 3. That's the impact of the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, when Dr. King was 28 years old, he was awarded his first honorary doctorate degree, having already achieved the PhD from Boston University. Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays said in the citation, Martin Luther King Jr., "You are mature beyond your years, wiser at 28 than most people at 60, living a faith that we all preach about but seldom experience." It must have been persons like you that the poet had in mind when he said, "How proudly we prudent persons," to change it a little bit, "compete for nameless graves, while now and then some unselfish soul forgets himself or herself into immortality." That is the kind of life and leadership given by Martin Luther King Jr. But I'm not quite through. I want to go back to the Reidsville State Prison, 1960. Dr. King wrote this letter from the jail cell of that crude and vicious prison system. He wrote a letter to Mrs. King. And this is how he stated it. Listen. "Hello, darling. Today I find myself a long way from home, a long way from you and the children. I'm at the state prison in Reidsville, which is about 230 miles from Atlanta. They picked me up from the DeKalb County Jail about 4 o'clock this morning. I know this whole experience is very difficult for you to adjust to, especially in your condition of pregnancy. But as I said to you yesterday, this is the cross that we must bear for the freedom of our people. So I urge you to be strong in faith, and this will in turn strengthen me. I can assure you that it is extremely difficult for me to think of being away from you and my yoga, that is Yolanda, the daughter, Martin, that is, for 4 months. But I am asking God hourly to give me the power of endurance. And here is a key and eternal statement. I have the faith to believe that this excessive suffering that is now coming to our family will in some little way serve to make Atlanta a better city, Georgia a better state, and America a better country. Just how, I do not yet know, but I have the faith to believe that it will. If I am correct, our suffering is not in vain. And then, skipping a few sentences, when you visit me, please bring the following books to me. Stride Toward Freedom, that's Dr. King's first book. Paul Tillich's Systematic Theology, volumes 1 and 2. George Buttrick's The Parables of Jesus. E. Stanley Jones's Mahatma Gandhi. Horns and Halo, and a Bible. Bring a dictionary and my reference dictionary called Increasing Your Word Power. This book is an old book and a red cover, and it may be in the den upstairs or in my bag. Also, bring the following sermons. And he names 18 titles of sermons, many of which appeared later in his book, Strength to Love. And then he asked her, bring a radio. Give my best to all the family. Please ask them not to worry about me. In 8 days, he was out, and his suffering helped to elect presidents, and it still does. What then is our responsibility? 10 days before Dr. King's assassination, he spoke to a congregation of rabbis in the state of New York. And Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel introduced him. And in his introduction, And by the way, Rabbi Heschel had marched in Selma. Rabbi Heschel said to that congregation of rabbis, Martin Luther King Jr. is a voice, a vision, and a way. I call upon, he said, every Jew to hearken his voice, share his vision, and follow his way. The very future of America is dependent upon the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. About 10 days later, Dr. King was assassinated. But the words of the rabbi still ring across the nation. The future of America is dependent upon the teachings, the leadership, the sacrifices, and the truth of Martin Luther King Jr. We have the dream. We have the work. We have the life. We have the lesson. Let us take it and teach it to our children, our children's children. And beyond that, let us walk and talk, live and help others to live according to the principles that have been given to us. Our nation is divided. Violence is global. Injustice is real. But we should, we must make a difference. And if anybody asks you in years to come, what did you do? Not what would Dr. King be doing if he was still, but what did you do in your time, in your space, by God's grace? Did you make a difference in your home, on your street, in your town, on your job, in your school work, in your walk, and in your talk? We can make a difference.
Dr. Moss, thank you so much. It is such a gift. We have been able to be in your presence, your virtual biography presence at the Maltz Museum, your time with us this afternoon, and then your speaking this evening. Such a gift. And I appreciate most the charge to do something. You've been talking all day about a movement, and it made me think about whether or not I'm moving and doing enough moving. And you said something today that I think we all wrote down that we're going to take with us. My hope and prayer is that when we meet the dangers, toils, and snares of the struggle, that we will face them with hope, sacrifice, and humor. So thank you so much. I have on the stage Sankofa. They are going to sing for us our national anthem, our Negro national anthem, before we leave today. And I just want to invite you and extend the invitation to get involved the rest of the weekend. On Sunday at the STJ building, there'll be a facilitated dialogue about Dr. Martin Luther King's beloved community. We're going to really dig into the 5 pillars. And if you have something to say and you want to be a part of the movement here in Shaker Heights, please join us. The details can be found using that QR code, but we'll be at the STJ building on Lee Road from 3 to 5 on Sunday. And also there's an opportunity to give in our donation drive on the 16th. The details of what we're looking for are on the back of your program, and you can also find that information on the website. Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope that you've been encouraged, that you heard something to lift you and to propel you forward. It's not enough to just remember what he did. If his sacrifice was in vain, if we don't do something, what are we going to do? Can we stand for our national anthem?
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty.
Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rise